that house I always wanted to build, or buy that car. That is a very obviously a wrong perspective to have, because if you don't understand the pain points of the institute or the agency or the organization that is putting out the announcement, then it's impossible to win the grant because they have a problem they're trying to solve. So you have to first of all understand that problem before you can, address it in a way that makes your application competitive. And by the way, the presentation today is going to be very broad. It doesn't just focus on research grants. I'm going to talk about grants in general, which will include funding for research, but also funding for R&D, research and development. So maybe you have an idea that you wish to develop into a business or into an innovation. Obviously, you need money. Without money, you can't do anything. So how do you go about getting investor dollars? So the focus of today's presentation is not purely on like, oh, I want to get funding to do research. It could be, I want to get funding to build this software or to go into build this innovation, whatever the innovation it is, the principles still apply. And the same thing here too is the same. Investor money is not free money. So even if it's tied to equity and it's not a loan, it's best to think of it as it's not free money. And irrelevant here is the 49 rules of power. The relevant here is rule number 40, despise the free lunch. So don't think of grant money as free lunch. We need to think about the purpose behind why that grant was issued. So let's talk about three key issues: types of grants, where to apply, and how to apply. But first of all, what are some of the benefits of applying and winning grants? Well, one, you have recognition. It gets you funding to do the work. Career advancement for specific types of grants we'll discuss in a second. It also provides some degree of credibility to the work. It shouldn't be that way, but we humans were very biased in general. So that work is funded creates the perception of, well, it's important enough to receive funding, so that means the work must be important. Those are some of the heuristics that we sometimes, engage in. It allows you to support the team around you. It makes the work sustainable, because for anything to be sustainable, obviously there has to be money involved. It also allows for you to build a larger collaboration. And of course, there are immigration benefits for those who want to travel. And of course, USCIS has very clear requirements for people who want to, let's say, become permanent residents. And one of those is showing extraordinary ability, which you can do with grants. So for those who are trying to get investor dollars for, let's say, build an innovation or R&D, here are some words of advice. One, if you can do it on your own, well, do it on your own. Investor dollars appear very attractive at the beginning, but like I said earlier, there's no free lunch. When you receive money from investors, what is happening is that you're giving huge chunks of equity. And overall, you can argue that it's better to have a small piece of something big than 100% of nothing. That's a valid argument. But overall, if you can bootstrap on your own and raise money from friends and family, do that. Because overall, bootstrapping is always better than loans, and loans are always better than venture capital money. So there's no free lunch. That's the bottom line. If you have to look for money, the best time to look for money is when you don't need the money. Because putting together grant applications or getting investor dollars is not something you just step on a dime and it happens overnight. It takes time. It takes effort. So plan for the long wait. So don't start when your runway is just 3 months. Runway is just how much time do you have before you run out of money. So start a year before, 2 years before. When you don't need money is when you have to start looking for money. Also, don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is a very tough economic climate. Chances of success are well below 5%. So don't say, oh, well, I think things never work the way we expect them to work. And that's my point number 4. Until the money hits the bank, you don't have it yet. So no matter how lavish the promises you've received from maybe a venture capital firm or whoever, as far as the money is not in your bank account yet, you don't have it. Anything can happen in the last minute. And looking for money is like a fish. You should approach it like a full-time job. So for those of you who are founders, that's like a full-time job. That's something you have to devote time to looking for money. And you obviously have to get comfortable with rejection, whether it's applying for research grants or applying for R&D grants or whatever kind of grants you're applying for, you must get comfortable with rejection because obviously there are no guarantees. So let's look at sources of funding. It could be US federal grants like NIH, which all of us know, but also very importantly, NSF, which is less known. The National Science Foundation offers grant, particularly in the area of research and development. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Then you also have non-US national government like the UK government or other countries of the world. There are private foundations or non-profits like the Bill Gates Foundation and Leventis and many others of that nature, which is typically more towards philanthropy work. Then you have multinational organizations and commercial sector, which is very important. I do a lot of work with drug companies and biotech companies. And so they have a need to demonstrate, civic responsibility. So they do offer a lot of grants. So in general, some academics tend to be more, have a moral high ground and talk about, oh, I don't want to receive money from industry. Sure, that's your prerogative, but people who do not mind receiving money from industry, there you can definitely look towards industry for funding, and that's less competitive because you don't have a whole lot of people looking for such funds, and it allows you to also do good work. Now, as an applicant, there are different types of applicants as well. You can apply as an academic institution. You can apply as a commercial or private sector or as a nonprofit. You can even apply as a government agency. So you have local governments or state governments applying for grants to the federal government. And small business only grants, that's also very, very attractive when you're a small business. And because in that category, you're not competing with the bigger firms. And especially when you are a minority-owned business or a female-owned business, that puts you in a very special category where you don't have to compete with a whole lot of people. So when you can find a category that is less competitive, just go for it. There's no honor in just sweating it out. If you can find an easy way, well, go for it. On types of grants, we're all familiar with research grants, but there are other types of grants as well. There are development grants, there are innovation grants, there are commercialization grants, which allow you to build on an idea. There are travel grants, and then there are programmatic grants as well. For those of us who are early career in the audience, one of the grants you should be aware of is R21. And R21 allows you to it's a developmental research grant by NIH. It's one of the mechanisms that allow new ideas to be developed. It's not only for early career people, but most commonly early career people apply for an R21. You sometimes use it for pilot or feasibility studies. It allows you to get funding for up to 2 years. The total funding for the 2 years is no more than $275,000. And so it's a very viable mechanism for, you have a great idea and you just want to develop proof of concept. That's a great mechanism for it. Like I said, this is a purely research grant. For again, early career individuals who want to get on the path to independence. So on the one extreme, you have R01s, NIH R01s, which are for established researchers. But how do you shepherd people? How do you mentor people to apply for R01s? Well, you start from a training grant like a K Awards. So here, for example, K99 Awards. The whole idea of the K Awards is to mentor individuals who have great potential so that they can grow and get to a point where they can apply for R01s themselves. So a K Award, K99, gives you 5 years of support. It's divided into 2 phases. The first phase where you are mentored under an established researcher, and then you have 3 years of independence. So that purpose is achieved of grooming you to independence. 2 years of mentorship, and then 3 years of independent work. The great thing about a K Award is that you don't even have to be a US citizen to apply for it. And then there are other award mechanisms from other countries of the world, like the UK and West African Research Council. And this is an interesting organization. It's funded by the US Department of Education. They don't have a whole lot of money, but they give a few thousands of dollars for travel or for dissertation or thesis. So if your budget is not more than $5,000 for anything, well, you could look at WARA, West African Research Council or Association. CDC Foundation they're not typically grants, but again, for those who are in the business of research, if they offer or they put out RFAs, request for funding announcements, where they ask you to deliver work. So you might be asked to do a survey or a large study or whatever it is. So it's a great mechanism for those who maybe want to become consultants in research and get paid for it, obviously. So you can definitely look at the CDC Foundation website for that. It's an example of industry grants. I do a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, and this is very common. They put out RFAs for proposals they want to fund. And typically, this is not necessarily pure research per se. They are more of translational research, more of things that should have an impact, a demonstrable impact on the community, right? And so for people who are in public health in particularly, those are some opportunities that you could look at. Where do you search for grants? There are many places. I use Pivot a lot, but there are others that you could search for. The good thing about Pivot is I love it because you can flag an announcement such that when something else like that comes in the future, it sends an email to you. But there are others that you can search. Grants.gov is a good one, but obviously it pulls out announcements only for grants that come from the US federal government, whereas Pivot pulls from around the world. So what are some specific considerations when applying for a grant? Well, you want to look at the likelihood of acceptance. If you are still in training, then why are you trying to apply for a K award? It's clearly for postdocs. If you are just a postdoc, why are you trying to apply for an R01? Doesn't make any sense. You're going to get rejected. So you want to look at the likelihood of acceptance. You want to look at the stage you are in your career. You want to look at the feasibility. NIH always puts out grants that involve secondary data analysis. Those are great grants for if you're just a one-man team. It's secondary analysis. You can sit down on your own in your office and do all the analysis by yourself and write up the results. So as opposed to a large, complex clinical trial, which may require a huge organization. So you want to look at the feasibility. You want to look at the time from application to decision, particularly when you are fighting against time. Let's say you are a PhD candidate and you need funding for your dissertation. You don't obviously have all the time in the world to go and start looking for all manner of grants. You need a grant that is clearly defined in terms of time. So time from application to decision, it should be one that is favorable. Pass-through costs is important. Most of my work is with big tech companies and pharmaceuticals. And so one of the things you want to establish clearly is what are the pass-through costs? That has to be in the contract. Because pass-through costs essentially are costs that are from a third-party agent or any third-party costs that you're just passing through to the sponsor. So if I travel to X, Y, and Z, is that cost part of the contract or is that just a pass-through cost? If I publish some work in a journal that requires subscription or payment, who is paying for it? Is that me or is that a pass-through cost? So you want to make sure that pass-through costs are clearly spelled out so that, because if you're not careful, you might spend the whole of a grant on third-party expenses without even realizing that. And then collaborators, you don't want to have too many collaborators. The collaborators should be individuals who add value, not just all of your friends. People should add direct value on the protocol to be counted as collaborators. And of course, you have to worry about indirect costs. So what are some of the things you need to have on hand for your grant submission. You need to have a biosketch. We'll show you how to do that in a sec. A cover letter, which should be personalized. Letters of intent or letters of support, rather, which should come from collaborating institutions. Letter of intent. Some grants might say, if you intend to apply for this application, then make sure you submit a letter of intent by so and so date. If that applies, then you should do it. And then lastly, the proposal itself should, obviously, you should have that. So what are some of the reasons why a grant might be rejected? Well, topic may be out of scope. The work may be seen to have little or no much impact. It may just be that the whole environment is very competitive. There's no problem with your grant. It's just that, well, you have a lot of very good grants. And then you may have missed some requirements. Maybe some paperwork is missing. The work is not well formatted. You missed the deadline, and so on and so forth. All right, let's go through and show you some of more hands-on things to do when applying for a grant. First of all, your biosketch. How do you create a biosketch? Some grant applications require very, very specific biosketches. So you can't just grab whatever document you have from your desktop and submit. For example, if you're applying for an NSF award, they have very, very specific. If you've ever tried this before, you realize that when you upload something that is not per requirement, this is automatic. It doesn't even get accepted. So until you create a biosketch that is exactly what they require. So here is how you can create a biosketch that will meet requirements. You go to these links, and we're going to share the slides afterwards. So you go there and paste the link. This takes you to this page. If you have an Era Commons account, you can log in. Otherwise, you can just sign in with your Gmail or whatever social media accounts you have. So let's click on more options. So I'm going to log in with Gmail. I'm not sure which one I use, but let me just use this one. All right, so it's a very simple interface, nothing complicated, but this is very helpful if you are trying to create a format, a biosketch in the format that will be required or will be accepted by NSF or whichever agency you are trying to apply for. So to create a new document, you come here and click on New Documents. You give a title to read like my NSF biosketch. The document type, you select the document you require, and this has to correspond to what you're applying for. So if I'm applying, for example, for NSF work or for NSF grant, I'll select NSF biosketch. If I'm applying for an NIH, yeah, these are all entirely different agencies, so you want to make sure you know what you're applying for. So let's say I want an NIH biosketch. I can choose to use an existing document so that it pulls out the records, or I can just start with a blank document and create. So next, it's going to ask me some of this information: your name, your last name, and some metadata like city, state, the country, the zip code, the email, and you can then save that information. And then once you're done, you can then provide the 1, 2, 3, 4 element, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Education, you have to provide at least one element in each of this. So education and training, you can add one. This entry is it just a degree? A degree is obviously, as the name implies, where you get a diploma at the end of a training versus a training which doesn't culminate in a degree. School, you provide the name of a school. Let's say so you type the name of the school that you are applying for, the states, whatever the state is, the country, you type that in, choose a degree, I'm just going to choose a random degree there. Field of study, type the field, the months you started, the year you started, and to the months, terminal months, and the terminal year. And you can save and add another, or you can just save and exit. And so that's how you've added the field there. You add a personal statement as needed. Here is my personal statement. And you can save when you're done. Positions and scientific appointments, you can add as needed from, let's say, 2021 to 2023. Position title, this is my position. The organization. And you provide the other information, state, country, and you can save. And then contribution to science, you can add as needed, make descriptions. And once you're done, you can then download the document as a Word document or a PDF or whichever format you want. So now it's downloading it. All right, so let's see. It's still loading. But essentially, that's how you create a biosketch according to. Okay, still loading. But anyway, so you're going to have these links, so you can play with it and see how you can create your biosketch according to required formats. So it's pretty straightforward. If you're working as collaborative, you want to make sure that you get letters of support. It's your job as a PI to draft the letters for the individuals. You don't expect me to provide you with a letter of support and then have to draft it myself. So you draft it for the different stakeholders. You can have exactly the same text in all of them. It doesn't really matter. And then they can then put it on the letterhead. So that is very important. NSF funding, very important for people who are founders or entrepreneurs. And the excellent thing about the National Science Foundation is, you get up to $2 million in seed funding and they take zero equity. It's obviously very competitive. It's a two-step process. The first is to submit a project pitch. And then if selected, that's a big conditional. If selected, you are then invited to submit a full proposal. The pitch is about a page or 2 pages that captures the idea. What problems in this world are you trying to solve? And that's review the review takes about 2 months. And then if they find it very competitive or very compelling, then you are invited to submit a full award. It can be on any topic in this world, from nanotechnology to research to digital health. It covers almost everything in this world. So it's less about the topic area and more about how crazy are your ideas, how disruptive are they. And so this is how the invitation for a phase 1 looks like. So you'll be told, okay, your application has been found very compelling in whatever space that you applied. And so you have been invited. And this is the criteria. It's a very simple but profound criteria. They look for applications. It says, when preparing your proposal, please remember that the program seeks to fund the development of high-risk, leading-edge technology with the potential for substantial commercial impact. So NSF, all they're looking for is that there has to be demonstration that your work is high risk, high reward. If you're coming to say, oh, well, this is bound to work, then that means there's no high risk. High risk means that your idea is so new that there's compelling evidence that there's high probability that it's going to fail, right? Because it's so new, it's so untested, it's so out of this world. But here are the mitigation measures I've put in place to make sure that it works. And should it work, this is just how much it's going to change the world. This is just how much money is going to change the world of commerce. This is how much money that will be made, right? This is how much is going to contribute to the economy. So that's what high risk, high reward means. High risk means that it's so fringe. The idea is so fringe that it's almost the likelihood of failure is so high, because if you're just repeating what somebody else has done, then it's not high risk at all, because somebody else has done it, and it's the formula is there. So high risk simply means that the innovation level is pretty high. All right, let's move on to back to the research world. Part of a grant, and now we're just benchmarking on an R21. What are some of the parts of an R21? Can we please meet ourselves, please? So an R21 has a title, there's a project summary, there's a narrative, then there is a biosketch. We're going to look at some practical examples. But before that, let me just walk through what some of those elements are. You need specific aims in your grant. The specific aims page has to be limited to 1 page. It can't be more than 1 page for an R21. Next, you have a research strategy, which cannot exceed 6 pages. And that research strategy includes the significance, the innovation, and the approach. So the significance, this is where you're telling us why is this problem important, right? In the real world, why is this of importance in the real world? The innovation is talking about how is this new, right? How does the methodology or the theoretical concept or the instrumentation, how is it new? How is it novel? How is it of advantage over existing methodologies? And then the approach, this is where how you're going to collect data, how you're going to analyze it, and all of the things that are associated with the approach are reported here. Other sections include the cover letter, includes inclusion or enrollment reports, protection of human subjects, which is where you have the ethics, letters of support, data sharing plan. They all come on the other sections. All right, so let's look at a practical, an actual NIH grant, and let's see how that looks like. Oh, by the way, this biosketch has loaded. So this is the biosketch we're creating. So you see, this is a very specific format required. And if you're applying for an NSF application, for example, if it's not exactly, they detect whether it's their software algorithm detects whether it's this exact format that they're looking for. If it's not, they simply reject it. So you can use that website we shared to just create your biosketch in the required format. All right, let's look at how R21s are scored so that we can look at some of the key areas you want to watch out for when you are applying. So here, this is a grant application that my center put together a long time ago. It was over a decade ago. The lead investigator was applying for an R21. I guess we said earlier, an R21 is, for 2 years, that covers no more than $275,000. Try not to, you must never exceed the amount, obviously. But try also not to hit the exact amount required. So if it says $275,000, don't necessarily apply up to that amount. You can put just a small buffer below the maximum required. So in this case, 207,000. What we want to look at here is look at the scoring. So my focus now is just to show how are these grants scored. What do reviewers look for? And it's much more educational, looking at the scoring of an unsuccessful grant, right? There are more lessons to be learned from reviewing how a grant that was not successful was scored, because then we'll learn more as opposed to just saying, hey, great job. So that's why I selected this grant, in particular, to see how that was scored. So essentially, this was an R21. It was, applied. It was submitted to develop some new evidence for tobacco regulation. The topic is of less importance to what we're trying to discuss. What we really want to focus on is what are some of the broad principles that underscore how grants in general are scored, so that when we're applying for it, we know what to look out for. So just like you have your manuscripts with reviewer 1, reviewer 2, and an NIH grant application is also scored by reviewers, So we're going to look at the comments from the different reviewers. The areas under which an NIH grant is scored include the significance, investigators, innovation, environment, and approach. Those are the 5 criteria. For each criteria, the scores can range from 1 to 9. Now, this is one area where you want to have low scores. A score of 1 is the best possible score you can get. A score of 9 is the worst score you can get on any criteria, right? So here, the environment, this is the best possible score. So we're going to look at the critique of, provided by each reviewer, and then we're going to see why they felt that the grant lacked, strength in certain areas and what we can learn from that. All right, so this is reviewer number 1 or critique 1. This is their scores for each of those 5 elements. They gave a very high score for investigators and environment, and an average score for the rest. Now, here is the narrative. I will just, again, I'm less interested in the strengths. I'm more interested in the weaknesses because that's where we can actually learn from. So for significance, the weaknesses, they say that the reviewer says that the investigators depend heavily on standard interpretation of existing information and methodology. So in any other context, this would be a strength, right? But when you're applying for a competitive grant, just saying, we did the exact same thing other people did in the past, that's no longer a strength. So standardization becomes more of a burden at this point, a disadvantage. Of course, you should standardize certain things, but the whole point of, especially for certain types of grants, is show high risk. Again, high risk means I'm doing something that is not out there at all. So when the whole framework is just based on things that have been done, then you can see why that becomes a weakness. So this is what that reviewer said. For investigators, weaknesses, none. For innovation, weaknesses, risk assessment and meta-analysis will follow standard established procedures. Again, that's a weakness. In any other context, that is a strength. In this particular context, that is not a strength because the whole point is to demonstrate your work is not high risk if it's just following what everybody else has done before. So in this particular context, then it becomes a risk. It becomes a weakness. For the approach, can the owner of the Infinix X6 and so on and so forth please mute themselves? Thank you. So for weaknesses, again, using established processes, that's a weakness. For environment, weaknesses, none noted. Then let's go to reviewer number 2. Reviewer number 2 gave a very high score for, again, environment and investigators and, average scores for the rest. Let's look at the specific areas. For significance, the weaknesses are the analysis of trace metals using the proposed framework have been reported by others. So again, we come back to the same issue of this approach you're using has already been done. So why are we giving you money to go and repeat what other people have done? Proposed studies are mostly survey type and routine data generation efforts using known methods. Again, you are using things that we already know. Why should we award you this grant? Seems like a waste of money. Investigators, weaknesses, none. Innovation, weaknesses. Innovation with regards to method development has not been established. So again, this saying the same thing in a different way. This study is not innovative because it uses just well-established methodology and doesn't seem to provide any new information. The approach, weaknesses. Aim 1 approach is not streamlined to define a clear objective. Aim 1 studies nothing but a literature survey, and also says that the Aim 2 approach includes assessment of health risks by application of a proposed framework that has already been reported previously. Same things. Environment, weaknesses, none. And let's move on to reviewer 3. Significance, under that, the weaknesses. Concern arises that it is difficult to place merit and value on a review document that is being called from information in the public domain. So essentially, this is more of just a literature review. That's what this reviewer is saying. You are reviewing information that we already know that is already in the public domain. So what exactly are you adding that is new? Under investigators, weaknesses none, innovation, weaknesses none, approach, weaknesses. M1 seems outside the usual limits that define experimental research and may be best suited by seeking support as a conference venue in which several sides of the argument and issues of health risks could be reviewed. So in other words, this reviewer is saying this doesn't, we would expect to see some kind of experiment here. This, what you're proposing falls outside that usual expected methodology we would love to see, which is experimental in nature. The preferred methodology should be experimental. Your work just seems to be doing a survey or doing a literature review, nothing really significant. So according to this reviewer, this should not be an R21. You should apply for a travel grant and go and present its results somewhere. Then, review number 4, significance, weaknesses. A specific aim is dedicated to examining documents submitted to the FDA or from tobacco companies. So again, you are simply reviewing documents that already exist in the public domain, which anybody can go and fetch. Why do you need a grant to do that? The investigators' weaknesses. The principal investigator does not have a faculty position, and it is not clear why he needs so many other investigators and staff to conduct the work for an R21 project. Again, this is the point I was trying to make earlier about not having too many collaborators. A grant is not an opportunity for you to invite all your friends and well-wishers to come and be on the grant. The more people you have on a project, it questions your ability. Like, why do you have so many people on this grant? And the only conclusions we can draw from that are that, one, you are incapable of doing the work yourself, and you need all of these people to come and help you do the work. Because if you are capable of doing the work, why then do you need all these people, right? So collaborators should be chosen intentionally, and it should be people who complement your skill sets, not replicate it. So if you are an epidemiologist, why do you need another epidemiologist? You might argue that, okay, my work involves some toxicology measures, so I need a toxicologist. Okay, that makes sense. Or I need a statistician. That makes sense, right?
So you helped me call HOD. When he came this morning, I forgot. You know, I said I would see him to before I can treat this.
Bakti, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. So again, having a whole bunch of collaborators on your project is not a good thing. It just indicates that, one, you are not qualified to do the work yourself, and that's why you need so many people to be on that grant. And two, it also questions whether that grant is going to be feasible, whether you're going to deliver the work. Because for every person you add on the grant, you obviously have to compensate them for their time. If you now have all these people on this grant, and you have to pay all of them, where's the remaining money that will now be used to do the actual work, right? So that calls into question so many things about your competence and about other things. So you can absolutely submit a grant as one person if need be, and you can submit a grant with other people. But if you're going to add people, it should be justified and it should complement your skill sets, not just because they are friends and well-wishers. For the innovation weaknesses, again, that you are just examining documents that exist in the public domain. Approach weaknesses. M1 should be done as part of preparation for an NIH grant application. So that this is not even compelling enough to be an aim of itself. It should have been work that the researchers should have done maybe as a pilot or as a, formative research in preparation for the grant. Environment. The weakness here is that the principal investigator does not have a faculty position. So again, if you are in an institution and if you're not a faculty, and by faculty I mean full-time faculty. So if you just have an adjunct position, that might count against you. So you might want to do something about that. Either you have the PI as someone who has a full-time position, and you can then apply as a co-PI, right? But sometimes this might count against you, as you can see here. So this is how this is how an NIH grant is called. Obviously, the subject area may be different, but in general, the principles are exactly the same in terms of scoring and how weight is given to specific things that have to do with the innovation, the significance, the environment, and the approach, as well as others. All right. So now that we've seen how an NIH grant is put together, the last part of our lecture today is to see how can we create a grant application. As you can see, the success rate for any grant application is very low, right? It's all about numbers. It's a numbers game because at the end of the day, it's a question of how many grants can you put together, right? Now, writing grants is obviously a very time-consuming task. So if it's a numbers game, then one of the most strategic things you can do is to find a way to create grants at scale, meaning that you can create them quickly, and then you can then iterate and provide value. Let's see what I mean. So, one of the toolkits on the Chisquares platform allows you to be able to create put together a grant application rather quickly, and then you can then iterate over it manually. So let's do a demo of that and let's see how that works. Is there anybody who is working on a topic that they would like to share with us to use as a demo? So if you're working on a topic that you'd like us to, use as a demo, you can just drop it on the chat box and we'll use that to demonstrate how we can create a grant application for that in a few minutes, and then how can the areas that we might want to okay, great. I've seen somebody who has dropped something here. Any other person who wants to drop a topic, a research question that they're working on, you can also drop that in the chat box. All right, let's go to the Chisquares platform. So this is the Chisquares platform. For those of you who are new, it's a one-stop shop for research. So that means you can design studies, collect data, analyze data, and do a whole lot of other things that have to do with research from a same place. All right, so let's see how we can do that. Let me log in. All right, so on the Chisquares platform, you have a whole bunch of features that allow you to do all manner of things related to research, from survey design and sampling and sample size. But for today, what I'm interested in, what we're interested in is the AI toolkit. The AI toolkit is a set of features that allow you to do a whole lot of things in a way that is fast. The idea here is that you gain speed and efficiency with the toolkits. It is by no means expected that you will just take what the AI has given you and just run away with it and go and submit. That would be really, really ridiculous. The idea is the AI toolkit helps you to create a version 1.0 of whatever you're working on, and then you sit down and edit it. So the whole idea is, how do you get a first solid draft? Because it's very hard to create one of the most formidable things is a blank sheet of paper. Like when you have a blank sheet of paper, that's very formidable. Some people have writer's block, they don't know what to write. So it's always better to have a first draft and then you can edit that draft. So that's the whole idea. So it is by no means meant to deliver perfection for you, but to assist you in that journey. So let's go to the AI toolkit and let's see how that works. And so let me grab one of the topics that have been suggested on the list. I'm looking for something that is poorly defined, that is not well defined as a research question. So we can go through that whole process. So, okay, I like this one: government funding and the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria, because it's generic and it's not like specifically defined in the form of a research question. So let me put that here. Let me create a Word document. So this is what I am working with here. The suggestion that was provided was this one here. All right, so this is the suggestion. So it's just a statement: government funding and the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria. So if you're when you're writing the grant, the first thing you need to do is to come up with a research question. So as you can see here, what we have here is not a question, it's just a statement. A hallmark of a question is that it must end in question mark. If your question doesn't end in a question mark, obviously it's not a question, it's a statement. So for a research grant specifically now, your research question must end in a question, right? Because the whole idea of a grant is to investigate and give us an answer. You can only have an answer where you have a question, right? So the first part of writing the grant is not even writing the grant itself. The first part is, how do you formulate a well-defined research question? And the elements of a well-researched question, it should have one of the easiest properties that it should end in question mark. It should be innovative, it should be significant, it should meet the objectives of the funder, right? So how do we then create research questions from this topic, right? How do we take this statement and turn it into a question? So that's the first task. So our first task is not even writing a grant. Our first task is to find a way to create a research question from this statement. So let's do that first. So on the Chisquares platform, we'll see that there are different tools that you have. You have the research proposal builder. We will come to this in a minute. You have the cover letter writer. There's the consent form generator, but there's the question generator. The question generator essentially does what its name implies. You put something there and it suggests questions for you. So let's try that. So let's go to this first. So remember, what we're trying to do ultimately is to create a grant proposal, an application that will submit to this agency. But for us to do that, we need to first of all decide on what our research question is. So let's put that statement here. This was the exact statement that we copied. Government funding and the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria. The research title, I can just put the exact same thing to that. It doesn't really matter. And let's see the questions that it generates. So now it has taken that the prompt or the information we shared, and it's trying to generate content from that, which we can then review to see how that looks like. So we can give it a few seconds to do that. All right, let me look at the other suggestions. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can please type them in the chat box. Lungile, do you have any questions?
Not yet, sir.
Okay. All right, so here we have our question generated. So this is the first. So first things first, you have this this tag here, the beta version. This is just telling you that this is still work in progress. This is an experimental version of the toolkit. We're releasing the finalized version very soon. And then the reminder here is, this is just to tell you that, please, whatever you do, don't just grab the content that has been generated by our AI and just go and submit it. Research is and should be an intellectual process where you, the investigator, well, do the work, do the intellectual work. So any output by AI is just meant to assist you. It's not meant to replace you, right? So please don't come and say, oh, the AI did not give it to me perfectly the way I wanted it to. Of course, it's not going to give it to you perfectly. It's your job to make it perfect. So So let's look at the output generated by AI and try to make sense of it, and then see how we can proceed next. So first things first, AI has given us a research question. Is there a relationship between government funding and the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria? See, this is now a question, right? Which allows us to explore it in the form of a grant, because for us, we cannot provide an answer where there was no question raised. And in the NIH format, you would have aims, like aim 1, typically for an R21, for example, might have 3 aims, 2 to 3 aims. So you have here, you have aim 1, aim 2, aim 3. The aims of a grant are, think of it as we're taking this big problem and we're splitting it into different parts, and we're answering each part, we're tackling each part as its separate component. So the principle here is split, apply, combine. We're going to split a problem into different parts. We're going to apply our solution to each, and then we're going to combine them together to give us one answer. So in the spirit of split, apply, combine, the different splits become aims. So the aims are how we're going to approach that big research question from different dimensions. So aim 1 is to investigate the effect of government funding on the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria. Aim 2 is to explore the role of government funding in supporting the development of startup ventures. And aim 3 is to investigate the long-term effects of government funding on the growth and sustainability of startup ventures in Nigeria, right? So those 3 aims address completely different things. Now, under each aim, you have objectives. Objectives are essentially, how are we going to achieve that particular aim? You should aim to have between 2 and 3 objectives. If you have just one objective under an aim, that aim is not broad enough. Maybe you should just collapse it under another aim. And then if you have a lot of objectives, maybe that aim is too broad, and maybe you should split it into other aims. So this is the objectives for aim 1. And then you also have hypothesis under each aim. The hypothesis is just a guess of where we think the direction of the results will go. So for example, the hypothesis for this particular aim states that startup ventures that receive government funding will experience faster growth in terms of revenue and employment compared to those that do not receive funding. That's our hypothesis for this particular aim. So we have our aims here. Each aim has objectives, and each aim also has a hypothesis, which tells us which direction we think it might go. Now, when you use the question generator, it also acknowledges the fact that the research question that you were provided with here may not be what you like, may not be what you actually like. So it also suggests other possible research questions for you to explore, which are below here. So the other ones here are, is there a relationship between government funding and the success rates of startup ventures in Nigeria? What factors influence the decision of the Nigerian government to provide funding to startup ventures? Does the amount of government funding received impact the growth and development of startup ventures? What are the major challenges faced by startup ventures? And so on and so forth, right? The last one is, how do Nigerian startup ventures utilize government funding? And what are the key factors influencing their decision-making processes? So it gives you a major question for you to, to think about. But it also acknowledges that, well, it's possible that you may not like that suggestion it has given. So it also provides an additional set of questions for you to explore. Surely, between all of these questions, you should find one research question that works for you. So that's the whole idea behind the research question generator. It takes a rough idea and it turns it into research questions, each of which has aims and objectives and hypotheses for you to use for your work. You can download the questions as a Word document and edit. You can also copy the content and paste it in your Word document elsewhere. You can also share the link with others. All right, that is just a research question. So again, like we said earlier, your first goal or your first task is not writing a proposal. The first task should be to refine the research question, all right? If you're a student, you're trying to develop your thesis or your dissertation or a proposal, again, that also holds true. If you just have an idea, we don't develop ideas in research, we develop research questions. So first task is take that idea and say, all right, what can I come up with from this idea? How can I develop a well-structured research question from this rough idea that I have. So the good thing about the AI toolkit is that it doesn't matter how rough your idea is, it will take that idea and provide you with well-developed research questions, any of which you can explore for your work. Now, let's go to our original task, which was, well, we are not interested in research questions per se. We're interested in a proposal. So how can we create a proposal with the AI toolkit? And after creating the proposal, what are some of the things that we might need to go through as part of our quality assurance to make sure that it's fit for use? So let's go to the research proposal builder and let's enter the required parameters. Here we have our title. It can be anything. And then our research idea, the same idea. I've not modified it. I just pasted that idea. The idea was government funding and the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria. I will just put the same thing as a title. Where the research will be conducted, Nigeria, the research team. I'm not sure who suggested this, but I'll just put my name, my qualification. I'm going to say I have a bachelor's of science and my role is the principal investigator. So the investigator here has a Bachelor of Science, he's a principal investigator, his relevant experience, 5 years running a startup venture in Nigeria. So whatever again, it doesn't have to be nice, fancy language. It's just whatever you want to type, you can type it, right? It's just to provide some context for who is doing the work. So you don't have to worry about, does the language sound nice or does it look elegant? No, you don't have to worry about it. Just type whatever it is that it obviously should be legible and it should make sense. It shouldn't be gibberish, obviously, but it doesn't matter how long or how short it is. So now we've provided all the elements we need. We have a title, we have a research idea, we have where the work has been done, the research team, and the relevant experience. So relevant experience simply means how is your experience relevant to the grant? So it doesn't mean your experience running a restaurant. Okay, that may be relevant since that's a startup. But you know, okay, let's say here, this is relevant because I have 5 years running a startup in Nigeria. It's relevant to the question. It may be less relevant if I'm talking about my research on mosquito research, right? On malaria transmission. That is not relevant to the context. So what you're being asked here is why you? Why should we take our money and give to you? Like, what experience do you have in this area? So that's what relevant in this context means. So once we've provided that, we can create our proposal. But if you have many team members, you can add as many as needed. But in this case, I'm the only person on the grant, so I'm just going to create a proposal. So this takes a few minutes. It's going to take the context and it's going to create a full proposal in an NIH style, which you can then edit, right? It may not necessarily, so a question might be, oh, but I don't need an NIH format. My own format is different. Well, that's your job. That's where you come in. Your job is to take the draft and customize it to what you need. Now, in the finalized version of this AI toolkit that we're developing, it's going to have a lot more features and have a lot more flexibility. But for now, this is the beta version. It's a bit more rigid, but you should still be able to create a proposal and be able to edit it to fit the particular context that you have, right? So that's your job. So again, I'm emphasizing again, don't just take it and just don't go and submit it. You have to read through it carefully and make sure that the content generated is fit for purpose, right? So that you can then use it for your own use case. All right, while it's developing, are there any questions? I saw some hands raised. We can take questions while it's generating the content in the background.
Charles?
Yes, thank you, Prof. for these sections and kind of reminding us. Confirm you can hear me.
Clearly.
Okay. So this is the part of this is part of the platform that I've used over and over. Like I've tried to run, I've over tested it. Let me use that word anyway. So the like you said, it's not replacing what we do, just like giving us it's more than like a lift, giving us something that can, reduce the level of work we need to do. The only thing I wanted to like point out is that using it over time, some things I felt like should be that we can include. Like I said, this is still in the beta mode, meaning that some things could also be tweeted. Can this particular can this
Rele or Gil, can you kindly mute yourself, please?
can we now, or can the platform include where I can specify the kind of budget, if I have a budget ceiling, or I'm looking at, okay, to say to put this particular amount, just the way we put for the PI and insert the names of the PIs and other information that the system now uses to generate the content. Can we also have like a tab where we put like budgets to say I want the budget to be like $100,000 or like $10,000 or 5,000, so that's, though from what you said is easy. Even if the budget is out, you can use it now to like modify what you want. But I'm just saying, just in a way to make it a little bit simpler again.
Thank you very much. So that's something we could explore for sure. But our desire really was to have a really small, easy interface. The problem is that customization is the very opposite of simplicity. The more custom you are allowing any system to be, the more complicated it's becoming. Like, if you're going to have space for everybody to provide, for each of the fields to be customized, then you suddenly no longer have a simple interface. You now have this huge interface where you now have to, so it's like, it's always complicated finding that balance between creating systems where it's custom, but where it's also simple, right? But that's something that we're definitely going to like, we've already added a lot of some of those fields in the final version, which we're going to release soon. But yeah, we'll definitely take that into but again, like I said earlier, the goal was to rather keep it minimalist, so that you have to enter 100 fields before getting a result.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a lot of feedback from you, and we're going to work on that, to make sure that the feedback you provided is well taken.
Okay. Okay, Prof. Like you always say, like you always kind of also encourage us. This is also where the ChatGPTs can work. Again, like I've also found another way of doing it. So even if, like you said, by the time we try to do a lot of customization, it now makes the user experience will not be that smooth. So again, people can. That's where ChatGPT can come handy. Like I can pull out that budget to say, this budget, please, I want it in this budget ceiling. So ChatGPT can now, so even if the person doesn't want to do it manually, so you put it up and put it on the ChatGPT, it helps you to now like stream it down to that particular budget ceiling that you want. This is something I've also tried, and it gave me exactly what I wanted. So
awesome.
So whether we include it or not, we can still make do of what's available.
Exactly, yeah. And so please, I'll encourage all of you, you can, while we're taking questions now, you can also play with the different features on the platform, the AI toolkit. There is a consent form generator, which allows you to create consent forms. There is a cover letter. If you're trying to submit a work to a journal, for example, you provide the name of the journal, the title of the manuscript, and you paste your abstract here, and you click on generate cover letter, and it's going to write a cover letter for you to submit to a journal. So the best way to really learn these tools is to play with them. The whole of these sessions are just to provide you with a 360-degree view of how it works, so that when you go, you can try playing with them yourself. I see the other hands up.
Yes, Dr. Samuel.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. We can't thank you enough, actually, for always sharing your knowledge with us. I've been really blessed during these seminars, different seminars. Yes, I just wanted you to probably make a comment or two on. We are talking about grant here, and it has to be, I mean, whatever topic we present or research questions and all has to be a winning one. All right. And you have mentioned something about even though your work is local, it has to be, or it should appear global. So I'm thinking if you can make one or two comments on, you have just taken a particular statement that you turn to research questions and all now. How can we really make that like a global issue, to ensure that it can win a grant? Many people will apply for something like this. And so I'm just wondering how we can, think around that. If you can make one or two comments so that we can always be winning.
Okay, so the easy way one way to do that is to always look at the PICO, right? We've talked about PICO several times in our sessions. Again, PICO, for those who may not be familiar with, is an acronym that stands for population. P equals population. I equals intervention. C equals control group. O equals the outcome. T is the time. And S is the study design. So just by looking at the elements of PICO, you can really, let me reduce the font size so it fits. So by looking at the elements of PICO, you can really make your work into a masterpiece. Let me start with the study design. So one of the criticisms of the previous research that we looked at, the NIH grant, was that, well, this is just a survey. This doesn't rise to the level of what we expect in the grant. We expect experimental designs. So start from there. So whatever it is you are researching, how can you now take it and frame into an experimental design? So, for example, let's look at some of the questions that were posed, some of the suggested grants. Let's see, and see how we can. So even this one, right? Let's even stick with this one so that we don't complicate it with much. Now, not every research question would easily lend itself to an experiment, but where it can, you can explore it for sure. So one way would be to see how can we convert this, because one way to do this would be to say, oh, let's do a survey of startup ventures and say, how much did you receive from the government, and we'll develop a questionnaire. Okay. Sure, that's fine, but it doesn't sound innovative. Again, we'll go back to the feedback or the criticism from all the reviewers, that this does not rise to the level of experiment we'll expect in the grant. So here we can say, if we're doing it in just a survey, to be survey of startup founders, assessing receipt of government funding, and how they use the money. So this is the survey, right? This is one way to do it. Now, is that really interesting or compelling? Well, you can argue that it is. You can argue it is not. But then there are also other ways we can explore that exact same topic under an experimental design, right? We can say randomized or interventional study. assessing revenue and profitability of startup ventures based on receipt or non-receipt of government funding, or based on type of capital raised. So in this case here, see, it's trying to get at the same thing, but the S here is different. The study design is completely different. Here we've changed this from just a survey to an interventional study, where we take all the startup ventures, we randomize the first group to receiving subsidies or grants from the government, right? The government agencies say, okay, here we're going to randomize one group to receive government funding. We're going to randomize the second group to receive funding from venture capital. We're going to randomize the third group to just say, oh, you're on your own, just bootstrap on your own, right? We're going to follow these companies over time, 1 year, 2 years. We're going to see what percentage of each group are still alive, what percent, how much revenue have they raised, how many users do they have of their platform, right? It's the same question we're trying to explore, but this is now completely different. Now, we can also still just do another design here, right? We're going to look at the cohort study of, Nigerian startups assessing, again, same thing here. Same research question, right? Same thing we're trying to drive at, but completely different approach. This is interventional in nature. This is observational, this cross-sectional study. And this is a cohort, right? Where we're following people. In this case, we did not randomize them. We just met them that way. We came and we surveyed the landscape and was like, wow, there are different types of companies here. Some were funded by, some American startup or American venture capital firm or some Nigerian, philanthropists. Others receive government funding. Others are just trying to raise capital on their own. We're going to follow all of these guys over time, and we're going to see 1 year, 2 years, how are they doing, right? So any reviewer will give this a low score. If I were a reviewer and I got these 3 grant applications, this is going to receive obviously the lowest score. This is going to receive the highest score because it's an experiment, right? And why does an experiment get the highest score? Because when you do an experiment, you are controlling for both known and unknown confounders, right? So this is great too because it accounts for time, but there are other things we don't know. Like the guy who is receiving money from a government venture may also be bootstrapping, may also be getting money from family members. So there's still a lot of noise in that setup here. There's still unknown confounders that we can never know. An interventional study or an experiment, another name for interventional study is an experiment, right? We, the investigators, are the ones who randomize people to receiving treatment or non-treatment, and we can then assess the impact of that treatment. So this is how the study design helps you, right? And the beautiful thing is that on the Chisquares platform, you can do all of those things. When you are setting up your study design, you can choose to create a longitudinal study, right, where you follow people over time, or cross-sectional. So imagine that you're doing you're trying to follow the founders of these hundreds of companies. Well, you can easily implement a cohort study, interventional study with this. You can set up a longitudinal study where every 6 months, every 3 months, or however frequently you want, the survey automatically goes back to the same funders and say, oh, how are you doing? Provide us your metrics. And then you have the data to provide, to answer the question that was set out. So any day, anytime, this obviously we get, number 2, we get the highest scores or the lowest scores for NIH. We'll get the best scores, let's just put it that way. And this will consistently get the least scores because it is the weakest design, right? So when you're designing a grant, always start from the S, the study design. And then the T is important too, because it depends on the outcome. If we're talking about in this case, let's just stick to this one example so that we don't introduce a lot of noise into the argument. In this case, time is important because what is the reasonable amount of time that we expect to see answers from the question? Here, we're talking about outcomes like revenue and, issues that are more long-term. So obviously, if we say the follow-up or the time duration of studies 6 months, we're not going to see any effect, not because an effect doesn't truly exist, but because the time period we have set out to capture the events is too narrow. So the time period has to be commensurate with the kind of exposures or the kind of outcomes we're trying to measure. If the outcomes manifest themselves in a duration of years, then the study duration should be in years as well. If the outcome manifests itself in days, well, the outcome can be measured in days as well. But whatever you do, the measurement of the outcome should be commensurate with the time it takes for it to manifest itself. In this case, it takes years, all right? At the very least, 2 years or thereabout for you to see any reasonable traction with a startup. So it will be kind of bizarre if you set the study period for this and this to 3 months or 6 months. You're not going to see anything, right? You're then going to conclude that, well, there was no significant difference between type of funding. That is not a true conclusion. That is a type 2 statistical error where you declare that something does not exist when it truly exists in nature. Your study was just not powered enough to detect the differences. So that's how you use T here too. The O, the outcome of interest matters. It should be relevant to what the funding agency is interested in. If this is a grant put forward by the Nigerian, let's say, Research Council, I'm not sure if Nigerian Medical Research Council, I think there's an agency like that. I may be wrong. Then this may not be a very interesting research question to them because the outcome is not what they're interested in, right? You're talking about the growth of startup ventures. That is not something that a research agency would be interested in. But if this was put forward by an agency that has to do with entrepreneurship, well, this is perfect, right? So you have to know who you're applying to so that the outcome you are putting is what they're interested in, right? The I and C, intervention and control, is saying always have a comparison group. And that's why you should go with the study design that allows you to have a comparison group. So remember that in epidemiology, studies are either descriptive or analytical. Descriptive studies don't have comparison groups. Analytical studies have comparison groups. So analytical studies are case control studies, cohort studies, randomized trials, right? So whenever you can, always try to have a control group. That just elevates the rigor of the research. And then the population. The population should be something of interest. This is where, when you're applying for grants, for international grants, where it matters. If it's, let's say, a grant being funded by a US agency, let's say FDA is trying to put out a grant, of course, the FDA is responsible for regulating things in the US. So bringing data from outside may, depending on the context, may or may not be of interest to them. So if you're in Nigeria, then it might make sense for you to partner with an investigator in the US and do it in the US, among US population. This is where collaborations and partnerships come in. It's to say that, well, you have access to a population I don't have access to. Can we partner? Or you have access to a skill set that I don't have access to. You're a toxicologist. I don't have access. I'm not a toxicologist. Can we collaborate? This is where strategic partnerships come into place, right? So by paying attention to the elements of PICOTS, you can create a grant that is compelling and that makes it just increases the probability of success.
Thank you so much, Prof. You have dissected. I even wanted to ask 1 or 2 other questions, but you have perfectly answered my question. I was going to say also that how do we do it on the Chisquares platform? And you have just answered that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Someone asked earlier, what defines someone as early or mid-level researcher?
So if you have gotten your terminal degree within the past 5 years, you are still early. So terminal degree in this case means a professional doctorate like, medical dental degree or a PhD. If you've gotten it within the past 5 years, you are early. Then for established researcher, that's just a function of how much how much productivity have do you have? If you are a if you and you can look at different metrics, right? If you're in academia, well, maybe you have a title that shows that you're already established. You have an adjunct professor, you have a professorship, right? Obviously, that means you're an established researcher. Well, hopefully. But there are other metrics you can use as well. It depends on the context and place, but overall, it's a function of how recently have you graduated and how much good work have you put out there.
Thank you. Can one have 2 grants at the same time?
You can have, of course, you can have as many grants as you want. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Yes, you can have many grants at the same time. Sorry, just a minute.
All right. Seems that's just about all in terms of questions. I've posted the evaluation survey. Everybody, you can complete it. Do grant applicants need to be affiliated to research firms, reputable in brackets, or learning institutions like universities? In this case, grants meant for early researchers.
Well, like we saw earlier, one of the things that you are reviewed on is the environment. Now, this, not every funding agency will have the same criteria as NIH, but one of the things that NIH evaluates you on is environment. And by environment, they mean that, so remember they have 2 separate parameters from what we reviewed. Let me pull back to, you have 2 separate parameters there. You have the investigators, which is you as an individual and your team, but then you also have environment, which is where you're working. So environment simply means, do you have enough support? Do we believe, is there reasonable evidence to believe that that environment you're working in can provide infrastructural support to do the work? It is by no means referring to the brand name. Like, nobody cares about the brand name, right? It is that, is there evidence from what you have submitted that the environment can support that? And when you're putting together a grant application, you tell them everything about the environment and the kind of things that you have in that environment that would. So this is for example, NAC 21 table of contents. You see, you have facilities and other resources. You are the one telling them that these are all the facilities that I have available in my institution to do this work. So, because as a reviewer, I mean, I don't know your institution. I've not been there. How am I supposed to know? So you are the one telling me that this is all the things you have. So it's not about whether your name, your university or institution is reputable or has a fancy brand. It's about, do you have the resources, right? So when I'm scoring you based on the resources that you have at that institution to do that work. So an institution may be, highly ranked for a particular project, but poorly ranked for another one, because for that other project, they may not have the resources to do it. So that is what it means. So don't worry too much about the brand name. Worry more about whether the institution has the resources and infrastructure in place to do the work. And please do not exaggerate the resources available in your institution, because if this is how you end up blacklisting yourself. If you say your resources, you have so and so resources, and when it comes to deliver, you don't deliver, then that becomes a problem, right? People have been actually put into jail for failing to deliver on the work, the money they receive from grants. So remember, grant money is not free money. It's not meant for you to just take the money and just go and spend it however you want. You're supposed to deliver. So it becomes a problem when you exaggerate and say all the good things in the world, but then when it comes to deliver, you cannot deliver. Then that becomes a real, with legal implications too.
Thank you. Any other questions? None.
All right, that's good then. All right. So please, I encourage you to take some time to look at the proposal. Oh, I didn't share the final.
Thanks.
So For our final proposal, this is what it looks like. So just before we end the section, so we can see what that looks like, so that people can go and practice at home as well. So this was the title, and this was the research idea that we had. It writes the background. So this is the output that AI has generated for us. So let's quickly look at the different parts and the ones that we want to pay attention to in particular. It has given us a background, and it talks about the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria is gaining attention as a potential driver of economic growth and development. It talks about how Nigeria has a vibrant young population and a large market, and that makes it an attractive place for investment, and so on and so forth, right? It talks about the aim of a proposal. This proposal aims to investigate the potential role of government funding in the growth and development of startup ventures in Nigeria, and also talks about why that is important. And then it talks about specific questions and research questions and specific aims. The research question is government funding associated with the growth of startup ventures in Nigeria? It talks about the aims 1, aims 2, aims 3. Each aim has objectives and has hypotheses as is required in an NIH style format. It talks about the significance of a work. It talks about about significance. It says, although there is increasing interest in government support for startup ventures and its potential benefits, there is limited information on the sources, usage, and effectiveness of government funding in Nigeria. So it says its goal is to fill that gap in knowledge. It discusses the innovation of a grant. It says, rather than relying on traditional measures of government support, this study focuses on examining the role and impact of funding and blah, 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 and how it argues about why it's novel and impactful. The approach is discussed next. Under the approach, we have the methodology for each aim, the methodology for aim 1, for aim 2, aim 3. Again, if you have 3 aims, we need to see methodology for each aim. There needs to be an aim specific methodology, right? You can't state an aim earlier and then you don't provide a methodology for it. That would be wrong. Every aim, you must provide a methodology, corresponding methodology for it. It discusses strengths and challenges, discusses the research team, it discusses the dissemination and future directions. The timeline is also discussed. The budget, the budget and the budget justification is provided, and then the references are also provided. The references are not done by AI, just in case you're wondering. The references are pulled from actual scientific databases, so you won't have a case of, oh, there's hallucination. No, that is not relevant here. So this is how a proposal generated by the Chisquares platform looks. So the idea is that you can then take this and then work on it. The idea is not that you will pick it and just go and submit. You have to do your job. You know, it's AI cannot and should not replace you, right? So this is just meant to give you a head start, not meant to just replace you or to do everything for you. So you can then take it here. Of course, know that AI may make mistakes. That is the context. So you might see mistakes. Well, that's AI for you, right? It's not meant to be perfect, but to just assist you in the process of generating your grants. All right, so that's how that looks like. I don't know if you have questions about that process, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, please go and try that by yourself. The best way to learn is to try it by yourself, and then you can see how the output is created, and then you can see how you can also weigh in. All right. Now that I've shown that, I can stop sharing.
Thank you. And they should please share with those in their institutions. I believe so many students can benefit from this. Please share, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. It's good to be back, Neliswa. I know you were helping even in my absence, and thank you for that.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Prof.
Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
And we'll see everyone else tomorrow. We're starting a new course, everyone. I hope you're all aware, and I hope you have registered. How do I claim my incentive? Samsung, which incentive? On the platform.
All right, Lungi, thanks everyone. Bye.
You don't answer. You don't want to respond to Samsung's question.
Oh, what was the question?
How do I claim my incentive?
How do you claim your incentive?
Yeah.
I have no context
on
for
the
that.
evaluation link. Oh, wow, Samsung. Incentive on the evaluation link. There's an incentive, Dr. Agaku. Did you edit 10 USD? Wow.
Are you serious? Please, that is a maybe you send the wrong survey. Oh, that is so funny. Like,
Dr. Agaku, are you giving people incentives for the evaluation?
No.
Maybe it's part of celebrating your upcoming birthday.
So please make sure you have shared the right survey. That is so funny.
But even so, any survey, Dr. Agaku, any survey, we do not have incentives. Maybe it's a secret.
I have no idea.
Please tell me about it.
I have zero idea of the context for that, so please. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day. That's so funny.
Yes, thank you. Tomorrow we're celebrating Prof's birthday. Please clean up your voices.
Oh,
tomorrow
no.
we are singing.
Oh. I will simply not show up.
We are singing tomorrow, and Prof, you're gonna be all well dressed and ready for us. Man, tomorrow you wear a suit.
Oh, that will not happen, I can tell you.
Oops, sorry.